China became rich too fast, and now the bill is arriving. The world's most successful development story may now be discovering the limits of success itself. China became rich faster than any country in history. It built more cities, more railways, and more factories than the entire Western world combined in a single generation. But today, more than 120 million Chinese people live alone. Young graduates can't afford homes, birth rates are collapsing, and an entire generation has started calling itself the lying flat generation. China didn't just arrive late to capitalism, it arrived early to its consequences. For decades China's rise refuted the pessimists. The country industrialized faster than Britain, urbanized faster than America, exported more than Japan and Germany combined, and lifted more people out of poverty than any civilization in recorded history. Its leaders promised that socialism with Chinese characteristics would avoid the social fractures of Western capitalism while capturing its productive dynamism. For a time, it seemed plausible. Now China looks increasingly like something else, not an alternative to modern capitalism, but its accelerated version. Single-person households have surged past 100 million. Youth unemployment has hovered at levels that made publication inconvenient. Housing affordability rivals the worst metropolitan ratios in the OECD. Inequality persists despite decades of redistribution rhetoric. Fertility has collapsed faster than anywhere in the world. The urban young delay marriage, the rural old age alone. Terms such as tang ping, lying flat, and bai lan, let it rot, circulate with unsettling familiarity. China, once celebrated as the great exception, increasingly resembles something more ordinary, a mature industrial society confronting the social costs of its own success. That would be reassuring, if ordinary were not itself in crisis. China did not escape capitalism's pathologies. It reached them faster, the paradox of arriving late. Economic historians once expected late industrialisers to enjoy advantages unavailable to pioneers. They could import technologies without paying for invention, adopt institutions without centuries of experimentation, and exploit global markets without building them from scratch. In theory, this should have allowed them to grow faster and suffer less. China confirms the first prediction spectacularly. It refutes the second. Latecomers inherit not only tools but contradictions. Industrial capitalism arrives prepackaged with urban inequality, demographic collapse, asset concentration, and social atomization. China's miracle compressed 150 years of European development into little more than 40. The rewards were extraordinary. So were the consequences. 500 million people moved to cities in a single generation. 90% of inhabited housing was built after the 1980s. Infrastructure rose on a continental scale. Steel, cement, and electricity consumption reshaped the global environment. Entire provincial economies shifted from subsistence agriculture to advanced manufacturing within the span of a career. Such transformations rarely end quietly. Urbanization as destiny. China's urbanization was not merely rapid. It was civilization. Britain's Industrial Revolution urbanized 10 million people. America's 19th century transformation shifted around 40 million. Japan's post-war boom moved 50 million. China moved 10 times as many. Urbanization on that scale alters not only labor markets but social expectations. Migrants do not simply change residence. They change time horizons. Marriage is delayed. Fertility falls. Education expands. Consumption patterns shift. Individual autonomy rises while family structures weaken. China's growing number of single-person households, over 1/5 nationally, reflects this transition. Many of those living alone are either elderly villagers whose children migrated to cities or young graduates postponing family formation in expensive urban centers. The phenomenon is less a cultural anomaly than the demographic shadow of development itself. Loneliness, in this sense, is not a deviation from modernity. It is one of its indicators. The household shrinks as the economy grows. Industrialization rarely preserves traditional households. It dissolves them. The extended family was efficient in agrarian societies where land, labor, and kinship were inseparable. Urban wage economies reward mobility instead. Children leave. Parents remain. Marriage becomes optional rather than obligatory. Fertility becomes costly rather than necessary. China's miniaturization of households therefore signals structural success before it signals social failure. Young migrants delay marriage because they can. Women postpone childbearing because they are educated. Rural elders live alone because their children moved to cities that did not exist a generation earlier, yet what begins as emancipation can end as constraint. Housing costs in major cities absorb between 30% and 50% of income for many young workers. Price-to-income ratios rival those of the most distorted property markets in the developed world. Even after a real estate downturn, ownership remains out of reach for large segments of the urban middle class. Family formation becomes not a personal choice but an economic calculation. Modernization is liberating. Then it invoices. The dual economy returns. Development economists once used the term dual economy to describe societies split between modern industry and traditional agriculture. Today the divide has returned in a more subtle form. Across advanced economies' high-productivity sectors, finance, technology, export manufacturing, expand rapidly while services stagnate. Asset owners accumulate wealth faster than wage earners. Regional disparities widen. Labor mobility slows. China increasingly fits this pattern. Its advanced manufacturing clusters dominate global supply chains. Its digital platforms transformed commerce at extraordinary speed. Its infrastructure rivals that of entire continents. Yet beneath these achievements lies a persistent divide between dynamic export sectors and slower domestic services, between coastal provinces and inland regions, between hukou holders and migrant workers. The structure is familiar. The scale is not. Inequality with Chinese characteristics. China's leadership has long insisted that inequality is a temporary cost of growth. For decades that argument carried weight. Few societies in history improved living standards so dramatically for so many people so quickly, but inequality has a habit of becoming permanent once asset markets mature. By 2020 the top two income deciles will be controlled by 2/3 of household assets. Housing played an outsized role. Property ownership became both a savings mechanism and a gatekeeper of opportunity. As in Western economies, rising asset prices enriched insiders while excluding newcomers. The difference lies in timing. Western societies experienced asset-driven inequality after reaching high income levels. China encountered it earlier. Premature maturation produces premature tensions. Youth without guarantees. The most telling indicator of transition is not GDP growth but generational confidence. For decades Chinese parents expected their children to live better than they had. That expectation is weakening. Youth unemployment surged before disappearing from official statistics. Graduate wages stagnated relative to housing costs. Social mobility slowed. The slogans of resignation that circulate online echo those once heard in Tokyo, Seoul and Southern Europe after their own growth miracles faded. Later industrialisers once promised permanent catch-up. Today they confront the possibility of convergence without prosperity. Demography arrives early. The most consequential difference between China and earlier industrialisers is demographic timing. Europe aged after becoming rich. Japan aged after becoming rich. South Korea aged while becoming rich. China is aging before becoming rich. Fertility has fallen below replacement levels faster than policymakers anticipated. The workforce has begun to shrink. Pension systems remain uneven. Rural regions age faster than cities. Immigration offers no offset. A society that grows old before it grows wealthy must either raise productivity rapidly or adjust expectations downward. Neither is easy. Capitalism without capitalists. To describe China simply as another capitalist society is misleading. Its economy combines market competition with political direction in unusual proportions. Banks remain state-dominated. Land is publicly owned. Industrial policy is centralized. Technology firms operate under party supervision. Currency management remains strategic rather than liberal. this hybrid structure allowed China to mobilize investment on an unprecedented scale. It also postponed some of the political consequences that accompanied capitalism elsewhere. Independent labor unions never emerged. Electoral pressures never constrained redistribution. Financial crises remained manageable, yet hybrid systems create hybrid contradictions. Markets generate inequality. States promise stability. When both expand simultaneously, expectations expand faster still. The export engine and its limits. For decades China relied on export-led growth to absorb surplus labor and accumulate capital. The strategy worked brilliantly. It turned coastal provinces into manufacturing hubs that reshaped global trade, but success creates dependence. Net exports still contribute disproportionately to incremental growth. A competitive currency supports industry but suppresses household purchasing power. Domestic consumption lags investment. Rebalancing has proved slower than expected. As the world fragments into competing trade blocs, reliance on external demand becomes riskier. China's integration into global markets once insulated it from domestic slowdowns. It may now transmit them. Housing as the social contract, the most important institution in contemporary China is neither the party nor the factory. It is an apartment. Real estate financed local governments, stored household savings, and anchored middle-class expectations. Rising property prices functioned as a substitute welfare system. Ownership promised security in a society without universal pensions or comprehensive health insurance. The recent downturn therefore carries political as well as economic implications. When property stops rising, expectations must adjust. When expectations adjust, legitimacy shifts. Industrial societies tolerate inequality more easily when asset prices rise. They question it when they do not. Loneliness as infrastructure. The rise of single-person households is often described as a cultural phenomenon. It is infrastructural. Urban migration separates families. Housing costs discourage cohabitation. Labor mobility weakens local ties. Education delays marriage. Digital communication substitutes for neighborhoods. Loneliness becomes not a personal failure but a systemic outcome. China's growing number of solitary households therefore mirrors patterns seen across advanced economies. It signals integration into modernity rather than deviation from it. The surprise is not that China experiences loneliness. It is that it experiences it so soon. The geopolitics of normalization. For 2 decades foreign observers debated whether China represented a new development model. Today the more interesting question is whether it represents the future of the old one. China's trajectory suggests that rapid industrialization no longer guarantees demographic stability, social cohesion, or political convergence. It accelerates them instead. The country's experience foreshadows challenges that many emerging economies will soon face: aging populations without welfare states, urbanization without affordability, education without mobility. In this sense China is not catching up with the West. It is catching up with the West's problems, success as contradiction. None of this diminishes China's achievements. On the contrary, it explains them. The same policies that produced export dominance produced regional inequality. The same urbanization that raised incomes weakened families. The same housing boom that financed infrastructure distorted consumption. The same education expansion that empowered women reduced fertility. Development solves problems by creating larger ones. China's leadership understands this better than most. Its recent emphasis on common prosperity reflects recognition that growth alone cannot stabilize expectations indefinitely. Redistribution, regulation, and social policy must now substitute for expansion. Whether they can do so remains uncertain. A familiar destination, reached differently, China today resembles advanced industrial societies in ways that would have seemed implausible a generation ago. Its cities face similar housing pressures. Its young people express similar anxieties. Its labor markets display similar segmentation. Its demographics follow similar trajectories, yet the route it took to reach this destination remains distinctive. Western capitalism emerged gradually through centuries of institutional evolution. China's version arrived through administrative mobilization. Western inequality followed financialization. China's urbanization followed. Western demographic decline followed affluence. China preceded it. Similarity of outcomes does not imply similarity of causes. The cost of compression, history rarely offers shortcuts without interest payments. China's compressed development cycle allowed it to leap ahead economically. It also concentrated adjustment costs in a single generation. Workers moved faster. Cities grew faster. Families changed faster. Expectations rose faster. Now expectations must slow. The experience resembles Japan's post-bubble adjustment, South Korea's demographic transition and Europe's housing crises, but all at once and at a larger scale. China is not repeating these histories. It is overlapping them, becoming normal in an abnormal world. The most striking implication of China's transition is not that it resembles advanced economies. It is that advanced economies themselves no longer represent stability. Across the developed world, fertility is falling, inequality rising, politics polarizing, and growth slowing. Asset markets dominate opportunity. Housing shapes mobility. Loneliness spreads. Social contracts weaken. China is converging toward this condition precisely as its desirability declines. Normality has become less attractive. The price of success. China did not fail to avoid capitalism's pathologies. It encountered them early because it succeeded quickly. Its urbanization was too large to remain socially neutral. Its export model was too effective to rebalance easily. Its property boom was too important to unwind smoothly. Its demographic transition was too rapid to reverse. Late arrival brought advantages. It also brought acceleration. China is not simply another case of modern industrial development. Nor is it an exception to it. It is both at once, a society that compressed capitalism's timeline and therefore discovered its contradictions sooner than expected. The good news is that China is becoming more normal. The sad news is what normal now looks like.